So many of us have a practice that's have strong revenue, but we have no cushion in the bank, no energy left at the end of the day, no peace when you close the door at night. That is not success. We build a practice where we pay everybody else more than we pay ourselves. That creates a big discrepancy where you are building a business, you kind of become the least paid employee in the business.
Or at least the last paid employee.
The last paid employee. I used to be in a situation where my staff would come to me for just about everything. And you know what the craziest part was? My staff always complained that they were overwhelmed, there was just way too much to do, and that we always needed more help. And the more help I hired, the less efficiency we had.
What does the practice look like today, 3 years later?
So 3 years later, there are 2 virtual team members that answers the phone and do all of my billing. And then I have my niece who comes in part-time. So sometimes she's my tech and sometimes she helps out. And then my husband and I, we pretty much run the practice.
What's happened to your revenue?
My net profit increased by 30%.
As a doctor dispensing, you probably have a pretty high capture rate.
My capture rate is 78%.
Wow.
And unlike many practices, I have one price point for all of my frames.
So what do they cost?
They cost
And that's every frame on your board.
every frame on my board.
Wow. Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today's guest brings a really interesting and kind of an unconventional and honestly eye-opening perspective. So in the first half of the episode, my guest, Dr. Lauretta Justin, walks us through a set of decisions that many practice owners would never even consider. But it completely transformed her business, and it's worth looking at this really interesting perspective. I mean, what she did is she cut the staff in her office dramatically. She charges one price for every single frame on her board. And she has a really interesting model behind that. And she also personally handles a big part of the visit that most doctors hand off. And she has really good results. Her practice is very profitable. So I'm not going to spoil the full model here, but it's one of those conversations where I kept doing one of these, wait, what type of questions, because it really forces you to rethink how efficient a practice can be from a different perspective. And then in the second half of the show, we actually dig into the philosophy that helped Lauretta get there. And it's really her work with Optometry Divas, which is a membership organization with thousands of women, and what she learned from surveying hundreds of women about their biggest challenges, how Lauretta believes that burnout actually comes from an identity problem, not a workload problem. We also get into her framework that's called the CEO of You. And then something she calls SIP, Significance Impact Profit, which is she believes every practice should be SIP certified. Really interesting. And it's just a fantastic blend of practical advice and mindset shift. So I think whether you buy into her philosophy or not, you're definitely going to walk away from this episode seeing the possibility of practice ownership a little bit differently. Quick reminder, if you have questions, ideas, feedback, you can always reach out at eugeneshatsman.com or through the Power Hour website, and make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. All right, let's get into the show. All right, Dr. Lauretta Justin, welcome to the Power Hour. Excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here, Eugene. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we've got so much to talk about on the show, and I think I want to start with the controversial perspective that you have on some of the things, some of the changes that you've made in your practice over the last 3 years. And maybe as we talk about it, that we'll get a chance for the audience to get to know you. And then we'll talk about the thing you're building, not that the practice itself isn't awesome, but the thing that you're building that has impact on so many other practices and what you're learning as you're doing there. So tell us a little bit about this thing that you discovered over the last 3 years in your practice and some of the changes you've been making.
When I started my practice, in the very beginning, I always knew the reason I wanted to go into business was to have autonomy or freedom, which happens to be in the very top of my core values. I love to be free. I don't even like turtlenecks because I love to be free. And when I started my practice, I didn't really know how I can create that as a business owner. The school that I went to really taught me how to be an optometrist, but I didn't know how to be a business owner. So 3 years ago, I realized that I was working hard and I was generating a pretty good income, or revenue is a better word. But my take home was not as much as I wanted it to be. And a lot of the business required me, and a lot of the staff management was such a nightmare for me. And it was so stressful. And I just felt like I was not getting the reward for the amount of work that I was putting out. And I started looking at my practice and I thought, there's got to be an easier way to do this, a better way where I don't have to work as much, but keep more money. Ultimately is what I wanted. And that's when I started looking at the efficiency of my practice. I started looking at how much am I repeating, or how much are the staff producing. I actually did not track that metric prior to that. What is the production of my staff? And I realized that I had way too many people for the number of patients that I was seeing and for the revenue that we were making. And you know, the craziest part was my staff always complained that they were overwhelmed. There was just way too much to do, and then we always needed more help. And the more help I hired, the less efficiency we had. I knew something had to be done.
Okay, this is a really, by the way, incredibly valuable point. The more people you hire, the less efficiency you have. We're going to come back to this point because but I want to get into some of the specifics. So you had a practice. Let's say, well, let's paint the picture for people 3 years ago. Did you start the practice, by the way?
Yes, I started practice cold. My practice has been around for a hot minute. So I know I look really good, but I've been around for a while. And I had a practice at that time. I had an associate and I had a team of 10 total. And I was seeing patients 1 day a week. My associate was seeing patients 4 days a week. And that's because I do have other businesses that I manage and run. But in this particular business, which is my practice, I felt like the efficiency was not there. Like I had 3 people in my optical, and the patients would still wait when they would come out of the exam room to be seen by the next optician. And it was just, and at the end, there were still orders that was not submitted on time, and the claims were still running behind. It was just a complete chaos, just because there were too many people doing the same thing. And I realized that is not working out for me. And it was just very expensive having all these people. That payroll was ridiculous. It was over 45% of my revenue. That's insane.
Yeah. So what does the practice look like today, 3 years later?
So 3 years later, there's me, the optometrist. I don't have an associate right now because I changed what I do in the practice. There are 2 virtual team members that answers the phone and do all of my billing. So all my revenue cycle management is handled by my virtual team member, and every telephone message, email, text is handled by my virtual receptionist. And then I have my niece who comes in part-time because she's a college student. So sometimes she's my tech and sometimes she helps out and submitting orders through the lab. And then my husband and I, we pretty much run the practice the whole day.
And how many days a week are you seeing patients?
So I see patients 4 to 5 days a week. So I'm off every other Friday. And I see patients between 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. So I see about 10 to 12 patients within that time frame. And so I do 10 to 2:30 Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday, I do 12 to 4:30 to 5. And then Thursday, I do again, Thursday and Friday, I do 10 to 2:30.
Got it. And what's happened to your revenue?
My revenue increased. Let me say it this way. My net profit increased by 30%, and my net cash flow increased by 20%.
Wow. Okay. And what you did is you basically got rid of, so the 2 virtual team members, I
Yeah,
imagine, that's a serious cost savings, but they're also dedicated.
it's
But
serious.
who's the optician in your practice? Is it your husband then?
No, me.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting.
Yes.
So revenue per patient on that, are you
It's
better
fun.
or worse than your opticians were?
I've always been the best salesperson in my office.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Knowing you just a little bit, Loretta, I'm shocked that you're the best salesperson. Um, so,
I'll
so
tell
okay.
you why I'm the best salesperson. Because I'm the one who figures out what the problem is and offers the solution from the beginning.
Mhm.
So, as the optometrist, my optician is really my closer. They're not the one who do the sell. I do the sell. I've always done the sell because I tell the patients what they need. I communicate the solution that they need. And then they would go to my optician who would literally close the sell.
Mm-hmm. So now take me through the patient flow in your office now. So a patient walks in the door, and if your niece is there, who does the
My
testing?
husband is in the front
Okay.
desk when the patient
Okay.
walks in the door. My
Okay.
husband's in the front desk, greets the patient, collect their copays. So let's structure it this way. I see patients about every 20 to 30 minutes, depending on what we need to do. I set the practice in my optical where I know the frames that I buy and I know the profit margin of all of my frames when I'm buying them. So I already know the price point of my frames. And unlike many practices, I have one price point for all of my frames.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter which one you pick, they all cost the same. So that saves so much time from finding all the different frames that fit my whatever.
Wait, so what do they
allowance.
cost?
They cost $349.
Okay. And that's every frame on your board.
Every frame on my board.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. This is so fascinating. This is another, I'll call it controversial perspective. I love this.
It is. It's $349. So when you come in, we have a price. We create 3 packages already. So we have 3 packages for all of our classes. There's just 3 set packages. And when you come in, you get the printout of the 3 packages. So you know exactly what it's going to cost. And then my husband would say, while you're waiting for Dr. Lauretta to come and get you, please feel free to browse the frame in the optical. You can pick any one you want. They're all the same price. So the patient just goes out. Now, all they have to do is find which one they like, which one they think they feel good in. And no one helps them do that. They do this on their own. Mm-hmm. And we give them a tray. They pick 4 or 5, put it in the tray, and they're going to bring it to me and they examine it.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is so interesting. Okay, so they pick their frames, they bring it into the exam room. Now, let's back up for a second. So they walk in, their appointment scheduled for 10 a.m. You're probably intentionally saying, I'm going to see them at 10:30 or something, just so that they have time to shop.
They walk in, because our frames are situated. We have women, men, and I have my frames by plastic and metal. So I separate all the plastic and the metals, and then I put all the colors together. So if you're a red person, you like plastic, you only go in one place. You don't have to walk around. If you're a black frame person and you like metal, there's only one spot where you can get that. So I arrange them where the way I've seen my patients select their frames. So once they walk in, they kind of hone in the area with what they want. And they really just have to make 3 or 4 selections from there. That process literally takes about 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And then there's some pre-testing.
Yes. So once I come out, I pick them up. And if they don't have time to select the frame, let's say I pick them up early, we do that right afterwards within that 30-minute time slot. So I will come out and I'll come in, get them. And I said, my name is Dr. Lauretta. I'm going to help you out today. I'm going to take good care of you. You follow me. And then we go into the pre-test room. So I do an auto refraction, I do a retina scan. And for the most part, those are the 2 that I primarily do on all my patients. And I would talk to them while I do the auto refraction. I'm like, what brings you in? What's going on with your eyes and your vision? And they'll tell me. And then when I do the retina scan, I do the retina exam with them. When I sit there, I go over what the retina looks like. I tell them, I check for this. I check for glaucoma. I'm looking to see if you have macular degeneration. this is what your eyes look like. So I'm cutting down on the exam time because I've already started it at the pretest.
Interesting. Okay. And so you go through all of this and then they're in the chair do you have any, are you using technology? Do you have a scribe or are you just, are you handling all that yourself?
I don't have a scribe because most of my exams are so repetitive. So I kind of categorize my patients into what they're coming for. If they're coming for glasses, prescriptions specifically, versus glasses and contacts, or versus some type of medical reason. And I have templates in my practice management system, my EMR, that I've designed for each of these specific visits. So once I know what they're coming in for, I just upload that template, and everything is generally put into the template unless I need to make a change.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so then you spend some time in the exam room. Now, presumably if the patient had time to shop, they brought the glasses with them.
They brought the frames. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, they brought the frames,
tray.
and they brought the frames right in the room. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you act as the fashion consultant. You're like, ooh, that one looks good. Let's put the right lenses in it.
Mm-hmm. So I would tell them after we do the exam, so my first goal is to identify what exactly does this patient want? Why did they come to see me today?
Mm-hmm.
And I always ask them, if there's one thing I could do for you today, what would that be? What do you need me to focus on? Because there's so much we can do. I can't do all of it in one visit. But what do you need today? Whatever it is what I hone in, what the patients say. So if they're like, I really need glasses because my eyes get tired when I'm on the computer, we're going to focus on that as our primary or our chief complaint. And that's what we're going to do. So once I figure out what the chief complaint is, and then I said to them, based on what you said to me, here is the best solution that I believe is going to work for you. And I would explain what that is. These are the type of lenses I want you to have. And now we just need to find a frame that can house these lenses. So in my dispensing, I go from lens to frame.
Okay. And then do you talk about the chief complaint, but if the person is like, well, I think my prescription changed a little bit, how deep do you get into like lifestyle questions?
I talk to people about what they do for a living, what they spend their time on, but it's really more conversational. So I would ask them, tell me about you. What do you do every day? If you're retired, what did you do? Or what do you do on a daily basis? And I tell them, I'm just really trying to see how you use your eyes every day so I can figure out how I can best help you today. So we have a conversation and we talk the entire time. I learn about them. I learn if they have kids. I learn if their kids are in college. I learn all kinds of information, but I use all those information to help them, to help create the lens that's going to work for their lifestyle.
Got it. Okay. So I imagine as a doctor dispensing, you probably have a pretty high capture rate.
I do. My capture rate is 78%.
Wow. A lot of multiple pair or no?
No, those are primarily single. I do have some multiple, but it's primarily one pair.
Okay. So that's, and this is kind of the advantage, a big advantage of your approach, which is that you're still able to spend 20 to 30 minutes with a patient and you're capturing the money on the back end and not letting it walk out the door. Whereas
Yes.
I imagine, contrast that for me, contrast what you're doing for me right now to the reality that you were experiencing when you had 3 opticians.
So before I had to do the handoff, and the handoff, a lot of times things got lost in translation in the handoff. And we had checklist, we had care guide. There's so many tools that I had for my team. I would have them come into the exam room toward the end of the exam and then go over the solution of the patient and what I'm prescribing, what I want them to have. And then I tried going outside, doing the handoff, and I would go over it with the optician. But then when the patient left me and started speaking with the optician, in my experience, there was always this discrepancy between what I said with the authority that I spoke and the way the optician approached the patients. And we've done a lot of training, but I just felt like when I speak to the patient in the exam room and I tell them this is what I believe would help them, it removes a lot of the fluff from the process. My opticians would then sit with the patients, go over the 3 price points that we have, help them pick out a frame. That process can sometimes take between 15, 30, 45 minutes, depending on the patient they're working with. That just used to take so much time.
Mm-hmm. And what was your capture rate then?
Their capture rate was 68%.
Okay. So you've added 10 points and you've taken out the spec.
I've increased my capture rate, and in so many ways, capture rate and then what I capture on the back end as well.
Well, that's it. So then you've, and now so much more of that revenue is dropping to the bottom line as EBITDA, right? Which is awesome. So one last piece, so patients finish their transaction, presumably they kind of from an administrative standpoint with your husband or whoever is up, or your husband at the front desk. Mm-hmm. How do you get the patients to come back? Because I imagine this high touch experience is something they really enjoy. So
I will tell them, Eugene, I love to see all my patients every year because I know what can happen if I don't check you in a year's time. I've had it happen so many times with other patients that I've had that I've made it a rule. Everybody comes back to see me in a year. So I'm going to pre-appoint an appointment for you. And I am going to harass you. I'm just letting you know right now because I care so much about you and your vision. I never want that to happen to me again. So in about a month before this time next year, you're going to start hearing from me. If you can't make it, it's okay, right? Because, life happens, but I do want you to know I want to see you every year.
That's great. And you say that to every patient? Every patient. I love it. That's so good. And I mean, when the doctor said, how long did that take? Maybe 15, 20 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Then I imagine your return rate is pretty high in the first year as well, if the doctor says it.
If the doctor says it, and when you say it, you have to really mean it. And I do mean it. I did have a patient, a child who actually 3 years we lost, they lost to follow-up. And when they came back in 3 years, they had a tumor that grew into the size of a tennis ball. That really changed my perspective of the yearly appointment. So I'm not saying this just because I want them to come. I'm saying it because I know what can happen if they don't show up.
Wow. Okay. So this is it's super fascinating. And it sounds like you're running the practice you want to run. You're working 10 to 2:30 and most days. And it's a good balance with your life. What's your plan for the practice? Just do you want to grow it potentially? Do you want to keep it as is, as it stands? You always talk to practices and some people are like, I know what this is and I know what it's doing for me and I really want to double it, triple it, whatever. Or I know what this is and I know what it's doing for me and I want to keep it as is because I want to keep doing more of that. So where's your perspective on growth?
So for my practice, I've decided to do a lot more specialty care. So myopia control is one of the specialties we do in my practice. Low vision is another one that I do as well. And I do a lot of specialty contact lenses. So in addition to the glasses, I do have those other specialties that allows me to do what I do at the pace that I do it as well. Right now, I'm in the middle of a relocation for my practice. So the goal is to really turn it into a very boutique type of location. And I want you to imagine the difference between going in Walmart versus Tiffany's. So it's a complete different feel. And when you go to a Walmart type of store, for example, there's a lot of people there. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise. And if you go to a Louis Vuitton, that's probably another example. It's not as crazy. It's not as loud, but there's a completely different feel. So that's where I'm planning to take my practice. And within 5 years, my goal is to transfer that to a partner associate.
Got it. Okay. So there's a couple other things that you pointed out that I didn't want to gloss over. And first of all, the question probably everybody's thinking about is, what's your relationship with managed care? Like, do you do?
I do managed care.
Okay.
I do it. Yeah.
And you said there's 3 packages. Explain this.
So there are 3 packages that I offer to patients according to their copays and the price points that I've set. So when you do managed care, depending on which plan you have, you don't really have a lot of leverage on what your lenses should cost, except unless you go really high-end lenses, which I recommend that you prescribe the progressive that is not in the tiers, because then it gives you more leverage. But you do have a lot of options in your frames as well. And I have made my frames where they actually give me a lot of profit, inside of them. So remind me your question again.
So, I guess I wanted to hear the 3 packages that you do.
Those 3 packages. Okay.
Yeah, and how you got there. And then really like the whole $349 for every single frame on your board. That must have been an interesting decision to make.
Yes. The $349 for my frames and my board comes from where I buy my frames and how I price the frame. So I know what the profit margin in the frame is. So the $349 allows me to make a significant amount of profit, regardless of what the patient does. The 3 packages come from premium. I have a standard and I have a value package. But I make sure that my value package is at the minimum of what I want the patient to spend. So all of my patients get polycarbonate AR lenses, and they all have the level D AR if you go by VSP. So I start with what I believe is the best quality that the patient can have, and then I put that as my basic package. So my patients don't get bifocals, nobody gets CR39. Everybody has minimum polycarbonate with AR lenses.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
And then we go up from there by adding either a high-end lens, like a level 5, or even VSP have certain lenses that are not covered by all of their categories. So either we do a category in lens, or we go to a lens that's not even on their product index. So then the patient only gets 20% off.
Okay. And that's your highest level package, or is there one more?
What do you mean? My premium?
So what are the package prices, I guess?
Oh, the package prices vary because it
all
depends on the patient's copays and what their insurance plan provisions are.
Got it. And your frames on your board, did you just, do you have any like typical brands that most people find, or did you, how did you decide what to carry in your optical?
So all of my frames are Millennium frames. Our practice is named Millennium Eye Center. I sell Millennium frames in my office. So I'm kind of like Warby Parker. Mm-hmm. I only sell Warby frames. I only sell Millennium frames. I would say 80% of my frames are Millennium frames. I have a few others that are just designer, like Gucci or a higher end designer, but most of them are Millennium frames.
Mm-hmm. And so you basically figured out private label relationship that makes it makes it profitable. But then I think with the private label side, in order for you to be able to maximize the insurance benefits, you have to have a certain price point that those white label frames come in at, right?
Yes.
What is that? How did you figure out how to do that?
How do I figure out how to?
Yeah, like the set is, I think there's the wholesale price, right? To maximize that, because I get the sense that your business acumen is so much about maximizing the profit.
Yes.
and profit per transaction while still doing something that's very valuable for the patient.
Yes.
So when you think about that, like when you brought in all of your, because I know the temptation, right? Like if you go to a Vision Expo, there's people selling frames for like $3.
Yes.
Right. And there's wholesale price in which you actually buy it for, but there's the frames data wholesale price, which then determines what you get reimbursed by the by the vision plans. So do you want to go through that calculation, or is that something you guys
So
consider carefully?
for my designer frames, I buy them on closeout, right? So that already creates a profit margin that I'm looking for. And like I said, that's about 20% of my inventory. The other 80%, I actually have a relationship with, like, I have a, let's see, I'm trying to figure out what I can say on this recording. I have a manufacturer that actually manufactures my frame line. And I have an actual other business that I created that actually owns the frame lines that I buy. So because of that, I can control the cost of the frame lines. Does that make
Got
sense?
it. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So you're basically your own wholesaler, essentially.
I am my own wholesaler. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
I decided to spend that money up front to do it, but it saved me so much money in the back end because I can do so much volume that I can never outrun. I never run out of frames. And if my patients ever had an issue with the frame, I can always give them a new pair of glasses. It wouldn't hurt me one bit.
Right. So then you really maximize the margin. And I was going to ask you what your cost of goods is, but I'm not going to, because it doesn't even make sense, because your cost of goods in your practice is based on your wholesale price, but your wholesale price is based on what you're buying it for from a manufacturer. So
yes.
It almost, I can imagine that you've designed, have you done this private label, the Millennium Frames, since the beginning, or did you decide to do that?
No, I didn't. I started doing that after I heard another optometrist. I was listening to a podcast, and she has a line that's sold in a retail store. I don't remember where it was. And I called her afterwards. I said, "How did you do that? You have your own frame line?" She said, "Yeah, you just got to reach out to the manufacturers, and then you got to set it up, create a business so it's a legitimate business that buys frames and then resell it to Millennium Eye Center."
Yeah, love it. That's great. Really, really interesting. Very smart. Okay, so I want to shift gears, so I'm going to do that after the break. So after the break, we're going to talk about your other business that has a ton of impact on the optometry community, and I'll ask you some questions about the Optometry Divas.
Okay.
All right, so we're back on the Power Hour with Dr. Lauretta Justin, and I really enjoyed learning about your practice, which I think speaks to your business acumen, and also the acumen that you had to kind of create a practice that fits your life, your lifestyle, your ability to run other businesses. And I think that's one of the things that you're constantly talking about with the Optometry Divas group. For those who are not familiar, talk a little bit about what Optometry Divas is, how it started, and then we're going to get into some of the trends that you're noticing.
So around, let's see, I have been in practice since 2006. So almost 20 years now. And, about 12 years ago, my kids were much younger at that time. And in my practice, I used to be open 6 days a week. I used to see in the upwards of 50 patients per day. I mean, it was crazy. And there was just so much going on in my life at that time, within my practice, within my family, within my life, that I was always so stressed out and overwhelmed. And at one point I thought, I can't be the only person who's going through this. I mean, there's got to be other women like me who's kind of overwhelmed and exhausted and tired and trying to figure out this private practice thing, or trying to figure out this motherhood thing, or just how are you a professional and do all this stuff. I can't be the only one. And that's when the idea started coming to me. What if there was a place where women like me could come together? What if we could empower each other? What if we could connect with each other and promote each other's success? What if there was such a place? where we felt safe enough to do that. As doctors, we always have the facade of being a professional. And as optometrists, as doctors, we have to be smart, we have to be kept together. But as people, that's not always the case. And I wanted to create a place where people can be people in addition to being clinicians and doctors and professionals. But we could be, girls too. And that's really where Optometry Divas was born, is out of that desire to create that place primarily for me. And it started as really like a hobby here in Orlando, just meeting within the ladies in my community that I didn't know at that time. And it just grew from there because people really like the idea of being in a space where they feel safe enough to share what's going on in their lives, in addition to, what's going on with their glaucoma patient. That's how Optometry Divas got started, is because I really wanted to have that type of environment.
So where is it at now? How many members do you guys have?
Optometry Divas, we are at about 2,100 members, I want to say. Haven't counted in a while.
All over the country, right?
We're all over the country, yes. And it has grown really into something that I can't say I had the plan for it to grow. It really grew in spite of really what I was thinking. And we have really spent a lot of time getting to know each other and building a community of sisterhood, people that, that are now my friends.
So how much of your connection is around business? How much of it is around, family and other things that are going on? And how does the community work?
So what I've discovered, I could talk about this survey that I did in 2024. I wanted to know what was the biggest challenge facing the women in my community. And interestingly enough, for a lot of us women, things kind of blend together. We don't necessarily compartmentalize. This is my business. This is my house. This is my family. This is my that, my this. Everything just kind of melt and blend together into one big thing. So I wanted to know, what was the biggest issue that was facing the women in my community? And a great percent of the people who took the survey, like I said, there was over 378 responses, and 212 women said burnout was their biggest struggle. So just the idea that I'm building either a business or my work schedule is not sustainable and I feel overwhelmed. And that was an eye-opener for me to realize that is an actual problem that we need to address as women.
Mm-hmm. And what's the solution? So how did you shape the community to support that?
So what I realized, I started asking questions to some of the women who answered the survey, kind of trying to hone in, why are you saying this burnout? And I realized burnout is just a symptom of a deeper problem. What I discovered is that a lot of the women in my community were giving out way more than they were receiving, which is kind of where I was in 2022, putting out a whole lot more than what I was receiving. And that's what I began to call the exhaustion economy, where you're in the hustle and you got to work so much, you got to do so much before you can get the little bit that you get. And that's what was causing the burnout that I feel the women were telling us that they're experiencing. So,
and you're saying burnout at work or burnout holistically?
Well, it all kind of ties in together, because you bring your physical energy to work. And if your work is chaotic, it's going to affect your physiology, it's going to affect you, and your spirit is going to affect you, and your soul is going to affect you everywhere. Because really, everything you do is a representation of who you are. So you run your house, your work, everything pretty much the same way. So if your work is chaotic, you probably have chaos other places in your life. So it wasn't just chaos in my office, but the chaos bled into my entire life.
Mm-hmm. Now, I like how you said burnout was kind of and I think you simplified it to look at it as you're giving more than you're getting.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because I hear this all the time in the workplace, and I hear from, when I do lectures, I hear people talk about the audit. I actually ask the same question. What's the number one issue? What's the biggest pain point in your practice? I've been doing that for the last 7 or 8 lectures that I've had. And so with hundreds and hundreds of participants, a little bit different, but I'm sure that it's related because it's almost always one of the number one issues in the group is always staff related. But people say my staff is burned out. So what does that mean? Is it the same type of burnout? Is it how do you define burnout in a way that's a little bit more specific than this intuitive thing that we think it is, and it might mean something different to me than it is to you?
I agree. It means different things for everybody, but ultimately it begins with an identity crisis as to who do you believe you are. I find whenever there is, quote unquote, a sense of burnout, if you peel back the layers, the person themselves has some form of identity crisis where they don't really know who they are and they have not stepped into that role. So I'll give you an example. We build a practice. A lot of my colleagues that I've worked with, some of them have been students that I've coached. We build a practice where we pay everybody else more than we pay ourselves. So that in itself is a big problem. A lot of us basically do all of our expenses, and what's left over is what we take home. That creates a big discrepancy where you are building a business, you kind of become the least paid employee in the business.
Or at least the last paid employee.
The last paid employee in the business on what's left over. And the danger with that is if your overhead is too high, your leftover is very low. I once sat in a meeting and I was talking about this concept of paying yourself first. And I know you read the book, Profit First. And so I was talking about it. And one optometrist asked me, how is it possible? How can you pay yourself first? You have to pay everybody else first. So your mentality, or should I say your identity, is where the issue begins. Are you the employee of your business, or are you its CEO? Mm-hmm. And if you just have a very expensive job where you come, you see the patients, and you pay everybody else, you get a little bit left, that's going to create the sensation of burnout because you are giving so much in yourself. You may be making money, but then you tend to lose yourself in the process. You become emotionally, energetically bankrupt because you get so exhausted. Dealing with staff, for example, primarily when you have staff problems, which I could raise both my hands, both my feet, right? As one person who has dealt with that. But ultimately, at the root cause of my staff issues is I did not take my place as the CEO. And because of that, it was hard for me to lead my staff. And that was difficult. And that
so what are the kinds of things that happen when you teach people to become the CEO of their business? What are the kinds of things that immediately need to change? What advice do you give people right away?
So when they first start to become the CEO of you, so that's the concept that I talked about. Like I started writing about this concept way back in 2015. I used to have a column in Women in Optometry where I would talk about become the CEO of you. And this really came from my own personal experiences. But I would talk about there's 3 steps that you need to do to turn your business around or create whatever success that you want. Step number 1, you need to create a winning mindset. That is the most important part of all 3 steps. Is the most important one is the one we ignore because it's the one we don't want to do. We all like to have numbers and no KPIs, no metrics. I shouldn't say all, because not all of us do. But we prefer to talk about that than to talk about what is your mission, what is your vision, what is your purpose, what I call the MVP. What are some of your core values? What are your core beliefs about yourself, about life, about people? These invisible things are guiding all the decisions that you make that shows up in your financial statements. So You got to know the stuff first. You got to know who you are. So the mindset is the first step. The second step after the mindset, you need to have the right strategy. That's very important. I always say, if you want to see the sun set and you start driving east, you're going to have a problem. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. It doesn't matter how fast the car you drive. And even if you're flying a plane, you're never going to see the sunset. So the winning strategy is very important. One of my coaches taught me the 5 pillars of business success when you have your strategy, that it needs to include the leadership, administration, operations, promotions, and sales. Those are the 5 pillars of business success. And then your strategy, we talk about how do you set that up. And then third, you need to have a winning team. So I always compare your team to the tires in your car. You need to have the right size tires for the right car. If you don't have the right size tires, it's not going to work for your car. If the tires are not the right shape, it's not going to work for your car. If the tires are not equally sized to balance the car, it's not going to work either. So you can build a very successful strategy. You can have the right mindset, but if you have the wrong team, your vehicle is not going anywhere. So you need all 3.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like, what a great overview of so much business advice in like 3 minutes. So I love this. I want to talk about the mindset thing because I agree with you. It is the most important one, and you called it the winning mindset. But then you started talking about like purpose, mission, vision, core values, like that kind of stuff. So if somebody wants to kind of do a gut check and say, do I have this in place or not? How do you know?
If you have the right mindset in place, I can tell you, if I walk into your practice, within 5 minutes, I will know if you are living in what I call the exhaustion economy, right? And at the CEO of You, all I do is I help practice owners develop what I call a SIP certified business. So they need to have significance, impact, and profit. A lot of times we don't have the third one. So the opposite of that is living in the exhaustion economy, what creates burnout. If I walk into your practice, within the 5-minute tour that you will give to me, I will know exactly where your mindset is based on how you keep your own office space. I have walked into practices where when you walk in the lobby, the optical, you want to take your shoes off, you want to put gloves in, you just are so afraid to touch anything because everything is so amazingly beautiful, spotless, they sparkle, lights everywhere. And then I get to the back and then the doctor shows me the area where they work and they open the door. And I'm like, oh my God, there's boxes everywhere. The paint is not finished. There's the decor on the hall. There's tons of paper on the desk. And this is where you work. That tells me a lot about your mindset. That tells me how you see yourself. And it tells me you haven't quite yet developed the winning mindset.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you're saying, and it's relative to how the rest of the practice operates. And so in that particular case, you are linking it back to profit first. It's like you're doing everything for everybody.
Correct.
Like you're the front stage, so to speak. When you're on stage, you're there for everybody, the staff, whatever. And then the doctor is kind of like that space is managed last. We don't really care what that.
You don't care about it. And imagine if we kept our White House that way, right? Mm-hmm. If you went to the White House, which is where the leadership of our country is, what would that make you feel, or how much would you trust that leadership? So that tells me a lot about how you see yourself and how you treat yourself in your practice. You have not seen yourself yet as the CEO of the practice. You are the last employee.
Mm-hmm. What's another sign that you're not quite in the right mindset, not quite in the right space?
Another one is having to solve your staff problems all the time. So I used to be in a situation where my staff would come to me for just about everything. There's a patient who needs a refund. Dr. Lauretta, there's a patient who needs a new copy of their prescription. Dr. Lauretta, there's a patient who's having some issues with their glasses. Dr. Lauretta. And so I would come to work. It was doctor. I'd go home and goes, mommy, honey. That's how my life was all the time. I didn't have a system. You know, When I first started my practice, I didn't know the word standing operating procedure. I didn't know those words. I didn't even know there was such a thing as an SOP. It wasn't until I was talking to my brother who was in the Army, and I was just whining and complaining that my team bothers me so much. They ask me questions for everything. And he said, well, don't you have an SOP? And I said, well, what's an SOP? He said, well, you got to have some way you operate. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, you need to have certain steps and checklists on how to do things. I had never heard of that. And I didn't know. So I started looking that up and I created my first SOP. That was back in 2009. And I've had a new version every year since then. So one of the things I could immediately see is depending on how many questions you have to answer, how much fires you have to put out every day.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. And I teach something similar where we think about, okay, do you have a business that's running itself? Is it set up for success without you? Are there accountability components in there? Are there ways for staff to keep track of issues without having to come to you for every single one of those issues?
Absolutely. Your business should be like a well-run vehicle. So when you get in your car, you just basically turn on the ignition, change your gear, put your feet in the gas and the brake, and you go. So you should be the driver of your business, not the tires, not the engine, certainly not pushing it up a hill.
100%. So and this concept of the CEO of you, it seems like it also captures not just the business life, but also the home life too.
Yes, it starts with you because you are the very first business. You are your very first business. And because you're an organism, so you are organized into system, into your physical body. So you are your very first business. And the way you keep your office tells me how you keep yourself. And the way you keep yourself will only magnify in how you let other people treat you. So it's not just about the business principles. Well, all of those are really a mirror of what you truly believe about yourself.
Okay, so a lot of this information is super helpful. And I know you just went through so much so quickly. So if people want to learn more about some of these systems and some of this content that you're sharing, or even the Optometry Divas, how do they get more information?
So I just want everybody to know that I created Optometry Divas. I created the CEO of You to help women like me and maybe like you stop surviving and start structuring for significance, impact, and profit. That's very important to me because you didn't start your business to feel stuck, right? You started it for freedom. And that starts by leaving the exhaustion economy. You got to make an about turn and decide you're going to create the life that you want. And that's what I call SIP certified, getting the right SIP. SIP stands for significance, which means you're doing work that aligns with your calling, your purpose. Impact means you're making a real difference for your patients, your team, and your community. And profit, the other P word, your business actually pays you. Just think about that for a minute. You have healthy margins, you have time freedom, you have cash flow, but in addition to all those, you have peace. And that is what I believe your business should provide to you. So many of us have a practice that's have strong revenue, but we have no cushion in the bank, no energy left at the end of the day, no peace when you close the door at night. That is not success. That is what we're calling burnout. And that is what this whole CEO of You concept is all about and what I teach in Optometry Divas. If you go to drlorettajustin.com, I actually created a burnout audit that targets these things. I called it burnout audit because that's the word everybody was using, but it actually helps you identify where are you leaking your energy, your profit, and your time. So there's 5 metrics it helps you identify so you can figure out how you can create a better practice, a better life, and get the success that you deserve.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I will make sure to post a link in the show notes. Lauretta, thank you so much for joining us today on the Power Hour. Amazing having you as a guest. You have so many interesting perspectives. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here. And I always like to end with this, everything I do. I always like to remind the listeners that you have the power to change your life. I just want to encourage you to actually do it. This is your time. This is your season. Go out there and make it happen.
Inspirational words. Thank you so much.